Hello, hello. We're doing something a little bit different than I normally do. We're going to be ranking the Duskmourn House of Horror commanders. Basically, not if they're good or not, or, their abilities, but more like how buildable they are in terms of, like, just playability and kind of fun, in my opinion, of course. So this is definitely a biased list, not a professional. It's my first time ever using Tier Maker before, so, it'll be rough, I'm sure, and we'll see if this even makes the light of day. But let's just hop into it, I guess. So first things first. First commander would be Amanatu, the Veil Piercer. Let's see. She's a legendary creature, human wizard. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 2. Then each enchantment card in your hand has Miracle. Its Miracle cost is equal to its mana cost, reduced by 4. So this card's actually pretty interesting. It's a Esper enchantment deck. And it's cool that Miracle's making a comeback. I think this is definitely not something I'd build in paper, but I think definitely Brawl playable. I don't know how good that is, you know what I mean? But I think this definitely would be a fun deck in Brawl to play. And yeah, my rankings are, building it now, so I'm probably going to build it Brawl playable. I'll build it on Brawl for sure, because it's pretty easy. Maybe someday, I'll get around to it eventually. Probably not. You probably have to, it had to be some, restriction, hey, we can only play uncommons, that kind of stuff. Not a chance. I probably will never play this deck. Because the card just doesn't seem interesting, I don't like the card, XYZ. That's my ranking. I know I got a little into it late, but I do think Amanatu is definitely a Brawl playable card. Just each enchantment having Miracle, which is interesting. Alright, next up we have Kiani, however you say it, Corrupted Memory. She's a Simic commander, legendary creature, illusion 2/2. As long as this card's power is even, you can cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. As long as Kian's power is odd, you can cast creature spells although they had flash. And whenever you draw a card, put a counter on her. So this card is interesting. It's kind of weird, and it's Simic. So I'm kind of leaning on maybe someday, right? The restrictions are interesting, don't get me wrong. At worst, for 4 mana, if you're playing this in turn, 3 or 4, you're going to draw a card before the next turn. So you're really going to only be able to cast creature spells the next turn, right? Obviously, you could wait and benefit from casting non-creature spells with flash. But if you're playing it with 4 mana, tapping out, the next turn you're going to draw a card, you're going to have to cast creature spells. I don't know. It's interesting, but again, you can always wait, hold priority and stuff. But I don't know. It's Simic, and it's just a weird card. I might build it someday, but it's just too interesting of a card for me. It's too unique, I like the easy ones. Next up, we have the Lord of Pain. It's a Rakdos commander from the commander set. It's legendary creature, human assassin, 5/5. It has menace. Your opponents can't gain life, which is always nice. Whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player. Lord of Pain deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to the chosen player. So, this card's good. Am I going to build it? Probably not. Is it Brawl playable? I don't think so. Just because the whole clause... So the problem with this card... I'll put it maybe someday for now. The problem with this card in 1v1 formats is whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, another target player has to take the damage. So if your opponent's casting a spell, you're taking the damage because there's no other players to target. And if you're playing, 5 mana for this, then they're most likely going to have the turn first. So you're going to take some damage. Obviously, give yourself hexproof. There's ways around it because it does say target player. But I don't know how many ways you can get hexproof in Rakdos, so I'm going to keep it real. But I think it's an interesting card, and if it wasn't, if you could, it's a May ability, then, definitely Brawl playable. I just don't think I'll ever build it, honestly. I think it's an interesting Rakdos commander, don't get me wrong. For me, I just don't, that's not really my kind of play style. I say that now, but as soon as I get to Valgavoth, I'm like, oh, I'm going to build it. But anyway, I think it's an interesting card. It's just not for me. All right. Next up, we do have a card that I really, really think is cool and probably super combo potential. It's the Master of Keys. It's X, 1 white, 1 blue, and a black. Legendary enchantment creature Horror, 3/3. It has flying. Whenever the Master of Keys enters, put X +1/+1 counters on it and mill twice X cards. Each enchantment card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana value plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. I'm probably gonna. I will say, this is probably the closest one so far that I might build this, and it's 100% brawl playable. And I'm torn because do I want another Esper deck? I'm probably gonna build this. This card seems very interesting. Enchantments, which are pretty awesome. It's a graveyard deck, which is pretty awesome. It's almost similar to the Amanatu, where it's like it's an interesting way to do enchantments. Like miracles are really cool, and now you have just an escape, which, escape from was it Theros Beyond Death was that mechanic originally? Yeah, I don't know. I think this card's really cool, and I'm probably gonna build it. I'm sure it's probably already been broken as well, because there's some put specific cards in XYZ into your graveyard kind of a thing. But again, it's a very cool card, and I'm probably gonna stick around with it. All right, next up we have the Rendmaw Creaking Nest. It's a 5-mana Golgari 5/5 legendary artifact creature Scarecrow. So Scarecrows are making a return. We got Medicine Reach. Whenever Rendmaw enters and whenever you play a card with 2 or more card types, each player creates a tapped 2/2 black bird creature token with flying. The tokens are goaded for the rest of the game. This one's interesting. It's kind of a bummer that it gives it to everybody, because again, if you get to that, granted, you're in Golgari, so you can definitely make use of removal a lot better than some other decks, most likely. I don't know if I like each player getting one. If it was just like you, that'd be great, right? Or not you, excuse me, like just one opponent. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe I misread. Maybe I misread the card just now, but I lied. It's not bad. Am I gonna build it? Probably not. Golgari is not my favorite. I'm gonna keep it real. Don't get me wrong. I do like, black and green. They're good card. The good colors like Serelf, the Realm Eater from Kaldheim. Sorry, my favorite Golgari commander right now. But I don't know. I just think this. It's just doing too much. I don't know. It's too specific in my opinion. You need 2 or more card types. So it has to be an artifact or a creature, or an enchantment and a creature, or that kind of stuff. Each player makes a tap 2/2 black bird with goaded. I don't know. I just think it doesn't seem very interesting in my opinion, and that's why it's down at probably not. All right, next up we have Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. This card's sweet. It's a 4-mana Rakdos, 4/4 with flying. Ward, pay 2 life. Whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a +1/+1 counter on Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, and draw a card. I am going to be building this most likely. I think this is the card that a lot of people are going to be building from the Commander decks for sure. That's just an interesting card. I know it's I think objectively worse Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin. I think that's the card from was it Aftermath, Mark the Machine Aftermath. But I think it also has just an interesting play style. Kind of, again, similar to Lord of Pain, but I just think this one's more interesting and more interactable in a way. And I don't think people will hate it out. I think people hate out Lord of Pain a lot quicker than they will hate out Valgavoth, in my opinion. Plus, drawing a card and making it bigger and bigger is nice. Again, it does only trigger the first time, which is a bit unfortunate, but again, they probably were trying to avoid another Ob Nixilis situation. But it's a cool card. I'm sure the deck list is probably pretty homogenized already, because there's only so many cards that do like upkeep damage and that kind of stuff, but we'll see. I'm sure you can make an interesting list out of it. Alright, next up, we have Winter, Cynical Opportunist, another Golgari card. 4-mana, 2/5, Death Touch. Whenever Winter attacks, you mill 3 cards. It has Delirium. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile any number of cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them. If you do, put a permanent card from among them onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. This is maybe someday, right? I do think the other Winter is a better card. just in general. But this card is pretty interesting with the Delirium ability. You're in Golgari too, so you can pretty reliably fill the graveyard, so that's not really an issue. I just think this card's kind of boring. I think Corum from Modern Horizons 3, The Undertaker, is just a better version of this, right? I mean, it's obviously they're different. I just think Corum just does it slightly better, in my opinion. But again, they're obviously different. You can put a permanent card, you don't have to cast it, that kind of thing. But well, I mean, I could be wrong, right? Someone could build a deck and make it phenomenal. In my mind, I feel like Core might be better. Here we are, though. I'm not an expert. All right. Next, we have Zamone, Mystery Unraveler, 4 mana. Let's see, Simic, can remember the name. A 3/3 legendary creature, human wizard, with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters Manifest Dread, if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. Otherwise, you may turn a permanent you control face up. I think this is a very niche card. Because I'm sure you Manifest Dread for landfall, which isn't terrible, right? You're also in Simic, which is a pretty good landfall color. But I just don't know. I think this card just is kind of boring. This kind of reminds me of the Xanathar from Murders of Scarlet Manor. Kind of a similar thing. I'm probably not going to build this thing. Again, maybe someday, but probably not. Like, we'll see. I doubt it, though. But yeah, I think this card's interesting enough. It's not a chance because, landfall, make a 2/2 that you can pick from is kind of nice, but otherwise this is kind of mid. Oops, wrong button. Wrong tab. Alright, next up, we go to the set proper now. This is Toby Beastie Befriender, excuse me. A 3 mana, white, 1/1, legendary human wizard. Whenever Toby enters, create a 4/4 white beast creature token with this creature cannot block or attack. As long as you control 4 or more creature tokens, Creature tokens you control have flying. Oh, I misread the card, I'm sorry. This creature, the token cannot attack or block alone. And then as long as you have 4 more creatures tokens have flying. This card's weird. It's not weird. It's just kind of mid, in my opinion. I mean, it does feed into the whole white thing of, hey, make a bunch of tokens, but I don't know, man. I mean, an anthem or a flying anthem for your tokens is fine, but I think the card kind of already exists, right? White already has so many things that +1/+1, give it all these abilities, that kind of stuff. I don't really think this card is anything special, so probably not going to build it. Alright, next up we have the Wandering Rescuer. It's a 5 mana, 3/4 with flash, legendary creature. It also has Convoke, and if you don't know what Convoke is, your creatures can help you cast a spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 generic or 1 mana of that creature's color. It has double strike, and it also has other tapped creatures you control have hexproof. I think this card is brawl playable for sure. It's also just the Wanderer is a cool character. I think most people would agree with that. The flashing in, protecting your board, because you can convoke them. Like, say you have some important piece. This card couldn't technically be free if you have enough creatures out. Again, with the token build and that kind of stuff. Protect a creature you need to. They have hexproof. Doesn't protect from removal, of course. And she herself doesn't have hexproof when she's tapped, but and this card's interesting as well. It's also a double striking 3/4, which is pretty dang good. I mean, it could be a free double striking 3/4, so you can block pretty well as well. I don't know. I think it's a pretty interesting card. Definitely brawl playable. Again, I don't know if the commander cards are going to be coming to Arena because I don't think they did it last time with Bloomburrow because they were so focused on like the other alternate birds and stuff like that. We'll see. But if they do, then, that's where they're at in the list. All right. Next up, the only mono blue legendary from the set. It's the Mind Skinner. It's blue, blue, blue. It's a legendary enchantment creature, Nightmare. It's a 10/1, which is pretty crazy stat line. The Mind Skinner can't be blocked. Even crazier, right? The downside is, if a source you control will deal damage to an opponent, prevent that damage. and each opponent mills that many cards instead. So basically, this thing hits for 10 and you mill 10. Obviously, there's ways to accelerate that with, Bruvac and other ways to mill. But I think this card is very, very mechanically interesting. So I think it's going to be definitely brawl playable. I don't think I'm going to build it ever, but I could definitely would build it in arena for sure, like 100%. Yeah, these are all for arena, by the way, for brawl. I don't know if I said that or not. But yeah, I think this card's really cool. It's a blue deck. I wonder how difficult it would be to mill an entire commander table out with this thing. Probably pretty difficult. But I mean, a one-on-one mill 60 cards, pretty easy, I think. Even a historic brawl is 100, but I think that's still even pretty easy. All right, next up, we have the only mono black commander as well. We got Valgavoth Terror Eater. This is a 9 mana, 9/9 legendary creature, Elder Demon, flying and lifelink. It has Ward, sacrifice 3 non-land permanents. If a card you didn't control would be put into exile, if a card you didn't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. During your turn, you may pay land cards exiled with Valgavoth. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than its mana cost. So this is a card that is very, very strong. It's also 9 mana. So I don't know how good this is going to be if it's in the command zone, right? I think this in the 99, like a reanimator deck, this card's going to just pop off, right? It's a very good reanimation target. Because you basically, you can cast stuff for free, has a crazy ward cost, lifelink. You get the life back from when you're casting the spells. I don't know if I'll ever build it, but I think it's definitely brawl playable. I just think it's too, for a mono black deck and there's other, you'd rather have a different commander, and this thing be in the 99. If you're going to actually build it in paper, in my opinion. But I think for brawl, this is easily pretty playable. All right, next up, we have a mono red. I think this is the only mono red one, too. With Norn Swift Survivalist. He's 1 red mana, a 2/1. He cannot block. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may exile it. You may play that card from exile this turn. This might be a case of I'm not smart enough to figure this card out, but I don't think I'm never going to build this thing. I don't understand the point of it. I mean, okay, it's kind of like the okay. Let me rephrase that. I understand how it could work, impact tremors, that kind of stuff, Perforos. I get it, kind of like the old Norn in a way. But the creature has to become blocked. So unless you're like putting crazy threats out, 1/1s and 2/2s aren't going to be blocked that often, in my opinion. And then again, it's just the worst Norn. I don't know. I just don't like the card. I just think it's weird. But I mean, it's very fitting for Norn as a character. Don't get me wrong. But it's just weird. I don't know. Again, smarter people could probably figure it out better than I can. I just don't see how this is a good card. All right, next up, another similar card here. We got Altanek, the Thrice Called. It's a 7 mana 9/9, which sounds pretty good, right? It's mono green. Trample. Whenever Altanek becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. You can pay 1 and a green to discard it and return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So if you're playing as a commander, the discard ability probably is never going to come up, maybe once or twice. If you get like Cyclonic Rifted or River's Rebuke or XYZ, unsummoned, that kind of stuff. But I think this is this one is close to being not a chance, just because I don't think there's a lot better options than a 7 mana 9/9 Trampler that when you target it, you draw a card. You draw a card, each one remove a spell, you get 9 mana to cast this thing. I just think there's better options in green, and I'm going to put it in not a chance, honestly. Now, don't get me wrong, this card's probably going to be interesting in standard because you can discard it. There's that one card that searches it up as well if you cast it 3 or more times, like say its name, I believe is the name of it. But I just think as a commander, this card's not very good. Okay, next up we have another green card here with Kona. Rescue Beastie. It's a 4 mana, 4/3 legendary creature, beast survivor. It has the new keyword survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Kona Rescue Beastie is tapped, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So that's pretty good. I think this is actually pretty playable in Brawl for sure. I don't think I'd ever build it, but I think it's a very basic card, but also just a very strong card. Because there's plenty of ways to make creatures tap for colors. You know, there's like 2 or 3 cards from this set that are like that as well. That creatures can tap and that kind of stuff. Also, vehicles exist. There's equipment. There's a bunch of things that you can like make tap down, and being able to just put a permanent card for free on the battlefield. It could be a land. It could be a huge beater, an ETB machine. Not the new Galta, but Galta from Lost Caverns for free, and turn 2 or 3 potentially. Like, plus it's a 4/3, so even if you don't even have a way to tap it, just swinging in with a 4/3 might even be good enough. Again, I just think it's a very basic card, but it's also a very strong card. All right, next up we have Tyvar the Pummeler. It's a 3-mana 3/3 legendary creature of warrior. Tap another untapped creature you control. Tyvar gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. You can pay 5 mana. Creatures you control get XX until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Speaking of ways to tap down Kona, Tyvar can also tap things down. Or, there's again, Kona is just a very basic but pretty easy card to exploit, I think. Now, Tyvar, on the other hand, is interesting. How would you run this? Like, do you run Elf Ball? Because tapping it to get indestructible is kind of like not the best, right? Sure, you can tap something and swing in and give him indestructible if the block is unsatisfactory, but I don't know, 5 mana, 3 generic, 2 green to pump it by X and X. I just don't know. Again, this might be a card that is good in the 99. I just don't know how good it is as a commander. I mean, it's another pump effect, right? But you have to have other I mean, at worst, right? If this is the biggest creature, everything gets +3/+3 until end of turn for 5 mana. Would you not rather just play Bristly Bill and just get landfall triggers and just double counters and everything? Again, not saying it's a bad card, but it's not on the top of the list kind of a thing. But again, it's not a bad card. It's just I think there's other cards that are better. All right. Next up, we have a Boros card, 1 of 2. Arabella, Abandoned Doll. It's a 1 red, 1 white for a 1/3 legendary artifact creature toy. Whenever Arabella attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. This is a pretty straightforward card. It wants you to have a lot of low power creatures, and it wants you to attack Boros things, right? I mean, it's more like white weenies, but also with red. But I mean, goblins are low powered, or low powered. Soldiers and stuff are low powered. You don't want to pump stuff up. This is a decent card, I think. I think it's going to see a lot of play, though, just because it's an uncommon, first off. I know people like uncommon legends for some reason. I think they're interesting. They're fine. They're not powerful, but this one actually does seem pretty good. But yeah, I think it's just pretty much like you flood the board, swing over there, Bella. Kind of reminds me of a Boros version of like Commissar Rain. There's Commissar Severina Rain, I believe, from the Warhammer decks. She's the Orzhov one. Like whenever you attacking creatures. You do a similar thing, but I think it's attacking creatures total, not XYZ. But I mean, Delney's really good in this deck. It's going to trigger twice. There's ways to trigger this more than once a turn too. So extra combats are obviously really good. It's also a 1/3 though. So like when you swing in, you kind of have a way to get through with it. But I don't know. It's decent. It's fine. It's just not my favorite. All right, next up, the other Boros commander, the Jolly Balloon Man. It's a red and a white for a 1/4 with haste. It's a legendary human clown. You can pay 1 and tap it to create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control, except it's a 1/1 red balloon creature in addition to its other colors and types. and it has flying and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. You can only do this as a sorcery. So basically, make a copy of something. It's a 1/1 with flying and haste. This is more. I think this is definitely like an ETB kind of a style deck, in my opinion. Like, again, this is very similar to like how do you build this in a way that is broken, but also not like incredibly strong, or sorry, not incredibly boring to play. I think this might be an issue where, again, it's a little bit similar, different, but it is similar in a way of like I think it was what Vanifar or Zagana, one of the two from I think it was Ravnica 4, Ravnica 3, like Ravnica Legions, War of the Spark, that block. There was like a birthing pod version of one of those two Simic commanders. And this feels like it's going to play kind of similar where you make a copy. It's a, you get a ETB, blah, blah, blah. It's a 1/1. You make a copy of the same thing, just multiple ETBs over and over again. I just don't think it's going to be fun to play. I could be wrong. If you're into that style, then, I mean, go for it. I just don't. In my opinion, this seems boring. But again, what do I know? All right, next up we have Marina Vendrell. This is a 5-color commander. It's Wooburg. She's 3/5 legendary human warlock. Whenever Marina enters, reveal the top 7 cards of your library. Put all enchantment cards from among them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of the library in any order. You can tap her, lock or unlock a door of target room you control, activate only as a sorcery. I think in terms of just like a new mechanic, the rooms are a thing. I think this is a pretty interesting commander, and I think she's definitely going to be brawl playable. Obviously, she's going to be better with the more rooms you have in the deck, and that's going to make the deck going to be kind of more of the same for most people, though. So it's kind of like, do you throw all the rooms in? Do you only do a specific ones and do the rest enchantments, kind of a thing? So I mean, it's definitely an interesting balance, I think, but I think a room commander specifically is going to be interesting. I think she's the only one that actually like does room stuff specifically as well. So I don't know. It's interesting. I do think the rooms are a really cool mechanic, or the card type, whatever you want to call them. So I think she'll be fun to play. All right, next up we have Nashi, Searcher in the Dark. He's a Dimir, 1 black, 1 blue, 2/2 menace. Whenever Nashi deals combat damage to a player, you mill that many cards. You may put any number of legendary and enchantment cards from among them into your hand. If you put no cards in your hand this way, put a counter, +1/+1 counter on Nashi. Nashi. Again, Dimir has a lot of interesting things going on. I think this is probably the first Dimir like Enchantress style kind of deck. Maybe even Legends Matter too. I'm sure there's probably one or two. I definitely think this is the first like Dimir enchantment deck. I think it's definitely going to be brawl playable for sure. Let's see. Yeah, like milling stuff. It's probably like a legendary enchantment matters deck, which is interesting for Dimir. And obviously, if you don't put anything in there, you can put a counter on him. So the next turn you hit, you can get more cards. Obviously, unblockable is going to be very good for him. He does have menace already, so he's kind of already somewhat hard to block. But obviously, put an equipment on him or give him access tunnel or something like that, where he can't be blocked. I think it's going to be an interesting play. All right, next up, we have Nico, Light of Hope. They are back. It's a 4-mana, 3/4 legendary creature. When Nico, Light of Hope enters, create 2 shard tokens. Shards, for those who are unfamiliar, they're enchantments with pay 2, sacrifices enchantment, scry 1, then draw a card, originally from Kaldheim. And then they also have 2 and tap it. Exile target non-legendary creature you control. Shards you control become copies of it until the beginning of the next end step. Return it to the battlefield under control at the owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So this card is kind of interesting for Azorius, right? I mean, you definitely want to blink because there's only 2 ways to get shard tokens currently. This Nico or the original Nico. Obviously, creating tokens and doubling tokens is going to be very good and useful. But I just don't know how because the last ability really only works if you have a lot of shard tokens. Sure, granted, you do get 2 right away. I think it's definitely going to be a blink deck, and then you just play like non-legends basically, which again could be an interesting strategy. I don't know how interesting that is for me at least. I just think the lack of shard tokens kind of makes you have to build the deck a specific way, whether that be tokens, doublers, or blinking. But I mean, Azorius is really good at that. Don't get me wrong. So I think it'll fit very well in the colors, but just for me, it's not it. It's not it for me. All right, next up we have Rip Spawn Hunter. It is a Selesnya card, 4 mana, 4/4, legendary creature, human survivor. It has the survival mechanic. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Rip Spawn Hunter is tapped, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is its power. Put any number of creatures and or vehicle cards with different powers from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's interesting that this thing includes vehicles. Because there's like what, one vehicle in the set? It's the hover ship? Or unless there's one other one I just don't remember. But yeah, it's interesting that it's a vehicle commander as well. Obviously creatures and Selesnyas, whatever. I don't know, this card just doesn't seem interesting to me. So I'm going to put it on probably not. Probably not going to build it. I do think it does get better. Isn't there like a car set coming out soon, like Death Race or something like that? I could be wrong. But maybe it gets better in the future, but as of right now, I just don't think it's very good. Because vehicles really aren't the best. I mean, obviously you have like a Seeker's Chariot, and that's obviously a very good card, and I think the new hover ship's actually pretty good too. It's like a Skycleave apparition, but it's a vehicle, so it's a little bit harder to get. But they manifest dread versus making a token that's the mana cost. So again, it's better or worse. It's similar enough that they can be compared like that, but I don't know. This card's interesting. I just don't know if I'll ever build it. All right, next up, we got a few left here. We got the Swarm Weaver. It is a 4 mana Golgari card. It's a 2/3. Whenever the Swarm Weaver enters, create a 2/1/1 black and green insect creature tokens with flying. And if you have Delirium, as long as there are 4 more card types from among card types in your graveyard, insects and spiders you control get +1/+1 and have Death Touch. This card's kind of mid. It's also a rare too, which is unfortunate. I mean, it is a Scarecrow, so if you're into Scarecrows, that's one more Scarecrow thing for you, but I just don't. This card just doesn't seem very good. Because, like, why not make 1 insect and 1 spider? Like, spiders being thrown in there is just a very interesting thing. I mean, I guess a lot of spiders are in Golgari colors, but I don't know. This card just does not seem very good to me. And I probably will not be building it. Now, this one, on the other hand, this next one. Oh, God, I'm probably going to butcher the last word here. Victor Valgavas Seneschal? Seneschal. Sure. It's an Orzhov commander, 3 mana, 1 black and white, a 3/3 legendary creature, human warlock. It has the new mechanic Eerie, or excuse me, keyword mechanic, same thing. Well, not really, but you know what I mean. Eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, surveil 2. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, each opponent discards a card. If it's the third time, put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So this reminds me a lot of, what's it called? Ariette from, what's the name of that set? The first Ixalan. Or I guess, sorry, the newest Ixalan, my apologies. Where it's like, whenever you enchant a creature with an aura, they can't attack or whatever. I think this deck's going to be built very similarly, but it's going to have like a Reanimator aura sub-theme, because you can enchant, because, they're enchantments, they're auras, so 1 mana, 2 mana aura enchantments, you mill your stuff, bring something crazy back. I think that's how the deck's going to play. It's a shame, because I think the ability is interesting, but I think that's, if you're trying to like min-max it, I think it's going to be a very strong card. We'll see. But I think it's definitely playable for sure, and I'm probably going to build it in Brawl for sure. All right, next up, we have the other Winter. This is the 3-color one. This is Jund. It's Jund and 1 generic for a 3/4 legendary creature human warlock with Ward 2, because everything needs Ward. Although this is like I think the first one with Ward, which is surprising. Maybe they're trying to stray away from it. Ward 2, at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws 2 cards. That's not good. And it has Delirium. As long as there are 4 or more card types among card types in your graveyard, each opponent's maximum hand size is equal to 7 minus the number of those card types. So this card's interesting. It's a hand reducer for your opponents. So, everyone's drawing 2 cards, so they get to have their cards for a little bit. Because they have to wait till their discard phase to actually get rid of the cards. I don't know how much I love the effect, though, because Winter's out. I don't think you play this unless you have Delirium, right? So I think you definitely need Delirium first. I think this is probably a better card than 99, than an actual commander. So I'm going to put it in maybe someday. I just don't know if this thing is going to be playable enough. Again, commander, maybe, just not for me. Alright, 2 left. We have Zamone, All Questioning, another Simic commander. It's 3 mana, Simic and a colorless. It's a 1/1 legendary creature, human wizard. This one's interesting, I will say. At the beginning of your end step, if a land entered the battlefield under your control this turn, and you control a prime number of lands, create Primo, the Indivisible, a legendary 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, and then put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So, yeah. And it has a list of all the prime numbers up to 31, just because they don't expect you to have more than 31 lands out, which is kind of funny that they listed all of them, so people just don't have to worry about it. It's a weird card, but like in a good way, right? I like that it's interesting. I just don't think I'm ever going to build it. Sorry, Zamone, you're in the bottom here. It's just it's too weird of a card. And again, it's a Simic. It's just Simic. It's just a Simic pile, right? It's Simic and you play lands and you have all the good Simic stuff in one deck. I just don't think that's interesting. So that's why it's down there. It's just Simic doing Simic things. Here we have a card that's probably going to be insanely good in every 99 it ever exists in, but I don't know how good it's going to be as a commander. It's a Marvin, Murderous Mimic. It's a colorless card, so it's 2 colorless. 2 generic. It's a 2/2 legendary artifact creature toy. Marvin has all activated abilities of creatures you control that don't have the same name as this creature. As a commander, I think this card is bleh. You're in colorless, it's going to be hard to build, in my opinion. So not a chance, right? However, in the 99, this thing is probably busted as hell. Pardon my French. This thing just it's just another copy of another activated ability you have. It's just a good card in the 99, 100%. Commander, not so much. But yeah, that's my tier list, or buildable list here. Any last minute changes I want to make? Let's see. I don't think so. I think it's pretty much where I want it to be at here. I'm trying to think. I think I probably would, thinking about it, I might move Nico up 1. I think it'd be interesting in Brawl, in Historic Brawl to build. But again, that's more just because it's a blank and you make a bunch of shard tokens. That's probably my final list here. Yeah, thanks for checking out the video. I don't know if I'm going to do this ever again, because we'll see how, I guess, well received it is. I don't know. I have shit opinions, so. But thanks for checking out the video, and I'll catch you guys later.